Well, as you can imagine, after all that happened, that it was a big relief to finally land in my teaching job, what I actually always wanted to do. And for those first few weeks, I was walking on air. I was on high, on a cloud. I felt I can teach everything, and I'm not gonna say no to anything. I can do it all, and keep smiling all the time. Looking back, even back then, I think I realized that what it was in those first few weeks was actually pretty much an ego trip. And there were several things that made me think that. I was always trying to evaluate my own performance in that time. I think that's quite natural for anyone who starts something that they've never done before to think, am I actually any good? And one conclusion that I came to at that time was, I am only as good as the last thing I did. In a way that a painter would never be able to say, this is my best work. I felt that whenever I'd done something well, whenever a class went well, I thought, okay, I am good at this job. But whenever I gave a bad lecture, whatever the definition of bad is, but it felt like that, I thought, okay, perhaps I need to go back to the drawing board. I'm not good at all. And the reason for that, I think, is that I wanted to be a superhero. But when you are a superhero, you're responsible for success as well as for failure. Like Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility. I felt very responsible for everything that happened. There were a few situations that I'd just like to talk about. In that first semester, I had some level 4 students approaching me with the question, Dr. Brady, what is your area of expertise? Oh, I swallowed and I felt a bit awkward because I don't have an area of expertise. Obviously I did my thesis on something, but does that make me an expert? And as a teaching fellow, you don't get a lot of time to actually read. And I thought, with this niggly feeling in my head, when will they discover that they know more about this topic than I do? And related to that was the Diederik Stapel saga that unfolded in that time. He was the psychology professor who had been found guilty of fraud on a big scale. Well, not only was he Dutch and a social psychologist, but he was also my boss, or had been my boss in years before. So I felt, if he is a fraud and I'm associated with him, does that somehow make me a fraud? It really gave my self-esteem a knock. The next poignant moment was the first time I ever had to give a bad mark to a student. She was a level 4 student and I had to give her a 12 on an essay. Now she was in my office at the time and we were chatting away, and then I had to give her this mark. Now I remember when I actually gave her her essay back, the look on her face just changed, and she looked at me with this hard stare, and I felt so awful. I really felt guilty. I felt it is my fault because I've put the knowledge in. I put the knowledge in her head, and it doesn't come out, so it's my fault. But is it my fault? I think different about that now, but I'll come back to that later. The other thing I did was something a bit of a risk. I did a live experiment during a lecture, and it paid off. At least that's what I said at the time. What actually happened was that I conducted a an experiment in this lecture theatre and found support for their hypothesis, which I never thought would happen. And afterwards I managed to calm them down again after all the excitement. But does that mean that it paid off as a teaching strategy? We'll see. Then I got an email from a group of level 2 students. In the lecture before, I had given them, I shown them an experiment that I'd done, and I said to them, okay, this may not be perfect because I'm human, so if you have any suggestions for improvements, please let me know. I'm interested to see what you say. So I got an email from them. First of all, let us thank you for actually giving students the opportunity to voice their opinions. It really means a lot in a world where authority and status sometimes create a barrier between the ones who teach and the ones who are taught. And if we're to make the whole university experience better for everyone, such interaction is invaluable. And I thought, yeah, I've really done something worthwhile there. I've got through to them. I really feel I could take them anywhere. I could teach these students something. We're on each other's side. And yeah, the funny thing was, I had an appraisal meeting with my boss that same week, and he said something to the extent of, we didn't hire you for your teaching skills, nice as they may be. Anyone can teach, but admin, that's what not everyone can. Part of me laughed because it was such a stark contrast, but the majority of me felt really sad, because if what I'd just done with those students, if that actually didn't matter for my job as a teaching fellow, then where on earth are we going with the university? There's something terribly wrong. Now, since the start of the PGCERT course, I can think deeper about these things. I can reflect. I feel I have the tools to sort of take a step back and actually look at myself. So in the next series, I'm going to talk about how my teaching motivation is related to the way I believe students learn. And looking back, was I actually an effective educator 3 years ago? What were the things I did that promoted deep learning, and what were the things that probably promoted surface learning? How have I changed in the way I teach since the start of the PGCERT course? And looking ahead, what's my next step in my professional development? So these and other things are still to come. Thank you very much for watching.